Sadistic human experiments. A pizza man trapped in a deadly game that would put Saw to shame. Diseases that make you dance yourself to death. A lethal cannibal love affair. And so much more. Why would you watch any horror movies when you could just visit Wikipedia? So let's delve into some of the most disturbing Wikipedia pages, starting with Unit 731. As its harrowing Wikipedia entry explains, Unit 731 was the name given to a covert research and development unit, otherwise known as Manchu Detachment 731, the Kamo Detachment, and the Ishii Unit. Owned and operated by the Imperial Japanese Army, Unit 731 was dedicated to testing and manufacturing various biological and chemical weapons throughout the Second World War. And as if the existence of such weapons wasn't disturbing enough, the Wikipedia page also further details how the research was conducted at Unit 731, and to say it wasn't pretty would be a significant understatement. This unit engaged in lethal human experimentation to develop their weapons. While the estimates for the total number of deaths vary, it's thought that between 1 and 14,000 prisoners were killed in Unit 731 between the years of 1937 and 1945. A further 300,000 are thought to have been killed by infectious diseases caused by the experiments and activities of Unit 731, with as many as 400,000 dying as a direct result of biological warfare using the weapons this unit developed by testing on living people. Victims included kidnapped men, women, and children, with the majority being Chinese prisoners captured as a result of the Second Sino-Japanese War, the conflict fought between the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan as part of World War II. Over the course of the war, Unit 731 became the site of some of the Japanese armed forces' most heinous war crimes, including injecting prisoners with diseases, subjecting them to controlled dehydration, placing them in hypobaric pressure chambers, harvesting their organs, amputating limbs, and live vivisections, as well as testing standard and biological weapons on as many as 3,000 people at a time during single experiments. As if that wasn't bad enough, there are 0 documented survivors of Unit 731, as well as nearly 500,000 people killed as a result of its experiments and related programs. Any leftover prisoners were executed in the final moments of the Second World War to conceal evidence. And sadly, Unit 731 isn't the only page on Wikipedia that details some truly gruesome human experiments. One entry, simply titled Human Radiation Experiments, delves into attempts to understand the effects of ionizing radiation and radioactive contamination on the human body. As you might have guessed, the page dedicates a portion to the nuclear program of the Soviet Union. As of 1950, the Soviets had around 700,000 people participating in radiation experiments linked to the program, around 50% of whom were taken from their forced labor camps or gulags. Prisoners were also used to mine radioactive ore. However, a lot of the information about the scale and severity of the Soviet Union's human radiation experiments is still classified under the Russian government. But a considerably longer section of the article details the human radiation experiments conducted by none other than the good old US of A, many of which are actually funded by various government agencies, including the US Department of Defense, the US Atomic Energy Commission, and the US Public Health Service. According to over 1.5 million pages of classified reports uncovered by the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments, the Atomic Energy Commission had sponsored numerous tests since the 40s that involved secretly injecting terminally ill patients in American hospitals with varying amounts of plutonium as well as other radioactive material, without the patient's knowledge or consent. Other experiments included the secretive feeding of radioactive traces to children to observe the effects of radiation on the human body, and enlisting doctors to administer injections of radioactive iron to pregnant women from impoverished backgrounds. During the Cold War, both United States soldiers and prisoners were exposed to high levels of radiation, as well as the latter group having, certain parts of them irradiated, which led to severe birth defects in their future children. Some of these U.S. radiation experiments even went as far as to exhume dead bodies to test them for radioactivity without the consent of the families of the deceased. If you ever want to get really disgusted over a total lack of ethics and morality on a huge scale, then this Wikipedia entry will have you wondering if anything you've ever eaten or drank was actually laced with deadly radiation. But there's another article linked at the bottom of the previous one that might also catch your eye, since how could it not? with a name like unethical human experimentation in the United States. That's right, the ways in which the US has conducted experiments on human test subjects are so varied that it has its own Wikipedia page. Throughout American history, there have been numerous documented cases of scientific experiments carried out on human test subjects, performed without the knowledge or informed consent of the people. Even more disturbing is the belief that there are unethical experiments of this nature that are still ongoing. Among the earliest examples listed in the Wikipedia entry detailing this gruesome practice is the mention of J. Marion Sims, often referred to as the father of gynecology. Between the years of 1845 and 1849, Sims performed surgical experiments on women from Africa who had been sold into slavery in the U.S. as part of the transatlantic slave trade. These women weren't offered anesthesia, since at the time that wasn't commonplace during surgical procedures, as anesthesia had yet to be widely accepted as safe and effective. One woman was operated on by Sims 30 times and suffered infections from the multiple failed surgeries. The article cites further gruesome examples of experimentation on human beings by the United States, some carried out by doctors who viewed terminally ill patients as research opportunities instead of people, and others that were endeavors sponsored by agencies within the U.S. government, despite violating United States law. The Centers for Disease Control, the United States military, and the Central Intelligence Agency have all had their hands in secretive human research programs, as have private corporations, of course, especially those with close ties to military activity. Other experiments include exposing human test subjects to chemical or biological weapons without their knowledge and infecting unwitting patients with fatal diseases. The aforementioned human radiation experiments also get a whole section of the article dedicated to them, as do other haphazard surgical experiments from the 1840s to as recent as the 60s. There are the infamous interrogation and torture experiments and tests involving mind-altering substances that the U.S. government sanctioned during the Cold War, such as various projects to develop a truth serum, and of course the CIA's infamous mind control project MKUltra. Of this whole wide and grisly variety of human experiments, the Wikipedia page also highlights an alarming consistency. Despite the various fields and absurd methods used, many of those experiments were performed on children, as well as other vulnerable people, including those suffering from mental disabilities and illnesses, who were often involved in these tests under the false pretense of being offered medical treatment. In many of these unethical experiments, the subjects were also either from poorer economic backgrounds, members of racial minorities, or prisoners. Oh, and as if all that wasn't already horrible enough, then it's also worth noting that even the human experimentation the US government has had a hand in was carried out without any authorization or oversight from Congress. In fact, in most of the cases cited in the article, the public didn't even learn about these experiments until the details of them were released, some decades after the horrific testing had been performed. Next up is an article with the relatively unassuming name 1985 Move Bombing. But what you'll see is that it is well placed on the disturbing list due to its description of the lengths to which people are capable of dehumanizing their fellow human beings and subjecting them to abject cruelty. Known to the residents of Cobbs Creek in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, simply by the date it took place, that being May 13, 1985, the Move bombing saw the destruction of multiple homes in the area at the hands of Philadelphia's own police force. The Philadelphia Police Department used a helicopter to drop 2 explosive devices onto the roof of 6221 Osage Avenue, a house that had been occupied by members of the Christian Movement for Life, also called MOVE. MOVE was a communal organization that formed as a part of the Black Liberation Movement, a branch of the civil rights movement that demanded more immediate action being taken against white supremacy in America. In the years leading up to the bombing, members of MOVE had relocated to the Cobbs Creek area of West Philadelphia. Their arrival was almost immediately met with complaints by neighbors to the police in the city. Some reported confrontations with MOVE or took issue with a bullhorn that the group used to make announcements and give political messages. This same bullhorn was broken and inoperable 3 weeks before the fateful night of May 13, 1985. Having obtained arrest warrants and charged multiple MOVE members with crimes such as parole violations, contempt of court, illegal possession of firearms, and making terrorist threats, the mayor of Philadelphia and the city police commissioner classified the group as a terrorist organization. Police then evacuated other residents from the area and then attempted to forcibly enter the house to arrest the MOVE occupants. When they refused to comply with the police's demands, an armed standoff ensued. Philadelphia police threw tear gas into the building and exchanged gunfire with the MOVE members, firing more than 10,000 rounds of ammunition in the span of 90 minutes. Then the police bombed the house, using 2.5-pound explosives made of a dynamite substitute combined with C4 plastic explosives provided by the FBI. That explosion ignited a gasoline-powered generator inside the house, causing a fire that the police allowed to burn out of control. 61 of the neighboring homes were also destroyed, leaving 250 people homeless. Inside the house, there had been 7 adults and 6 children, all but 2 of whom were killed in the blaze. One of them was John Africa, the founder of MOVE, and a bunch of other unfortunate members. Only 1 child and 1 adult survived. A later federal court lawsuit filed against the city of Philadelphia determined that this was a use of excessive force by the Philadelphia Police Department that violated constitutional protections against unreasonable search and seizure. There are disturbing moments in history, disturbing acts perpetrated against other human beings. But once every few centuries, there comes a figure whose entire life and even their very nature is in and of itself disturbing. Allow us to introduce you to the Wikipedia article on Tarrare. Born in France circa 1772, Tarrare was a man of what we'll call a particularly refined taste. His unusually insatiable appetite garnered him work as a showman, a soldier, and even a spy, because his superpowered stomach could keep down just about anything he threw at it, from corks, stones, and a whole basket full of apples to inhuman quantities of meat, including live animals. From a very young age, Tarrare expressed a constant state of hunger, one so severe his parents couldn't provide enough food for him and eventually forced him to leave home as a teenager. Tarrare would then travel across the country, eventually finding some form of work as the warm-up act for a traveling charlatan. Think of them like ringleaders of a circus, except the goal is to swindle the audience out of their money. Making his way to Paris, Tarrare would continue onto a career as a solo act, working as a street performer for a time. Then, the famished Frenchman joined the French Revolutionary Army, where he ate 4 times the standard military rations, and even that was unable to satisfy his insatiable appetite. He ate any and all food that he could get his hands on, and this included anything discarded in gutters and rubbish heaps, a delicacy for the discerning palate, no doubt. Gradually, his unusual condition caused his body to deteriorate through constant hunger. Tarrare was sent to the hospital for exhaustion linked to his perpetual need for food, and thus led him to becoming the subject of several medical experiments. Doctors sought to fully test the capacity of his seemingly never-full stomach. During one of those tests, Tarrare effortlessly ate a meal intended for 15 people in one sitting. Among the long list of things he ate were, and brace yourself if you're at all squeamish, live cats, snakes, lizards, puppies, and even eels, which he was able to swallow whole without so much as chewing. Anyone got any Pepto-Bismol? Now, one of the generals in the French Revolution, Alexandre de Beauharnais, received words of Tarrare and his acquired tastes, and naturally, the first question that came to his mind was, how could we put this ability to military use? So Tarrare became a courier for the French army. The plan was to have him swallow documents and then sneak through the enemy lines, recover the messages from, well, his other end, and then safely deliver that intact military intelligence when he arrived at his destination. We cannot imagine that those documents smelled at all that pleasant. However, during his first mission, Tarrare was captured by Prussian forces and severely beaten before confessing to his mission. He was promptly chained to a latrine, and 30 hours after it had been swallowed, that message came out. But it turned out that the valuable documents Tarrare had within him were actually only a test and strategically useless. Furious at this waste of time, the Prussian commander subjected him to a mock execution. This isn't the same as an actual execution, but it's instead a psychologically devastating form of torture wherein a victim is made to believe they are just about to be executed, making them recount their last wishes, dig their own grave, and otherwise face the imminence of their apparent death. After being sent back to the French army and utterly humiliated by his experience, Tarrare felt it was time to search for a definitive cure to his condition. He agreed to undergo any medical procedure presented to him if it meant a chance to be rid of his appetite for good. He was treated with laudanum, tobacco pills, and fed large portions of soft-boiled eggs to suppress his appetite. But unfortunately, not one of those procedures was successful. Doctors thought the best thing to do would be keep Tarrare on a medically controlled diet. But even that wasn't enough to subdue his ravenous appetite. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for refuse left in the gutter and in rubbish heaps outside the butcher shops. Terrer even drank the blood from other patients who had been bloodletting in the hospital and occasionally snacked on the corpses kept in the morgue. At one point in 1794, a 14-month-old toddler disappeared from the hospital. Immediately, there was only one suspect in everyone's minds who could have been responsible. Staff forcibly ejected Terrer from the hospital and he never returned. After going missing for a time, he reappeared 4 years later in Versailles with severe tuberculosis that would soon claim his life after a final battle with continuous exudative diarrhea. Following his death and an initial refusal to dissect the rapidly rotting corpse, surgeons found that Terrer had an abnormally wide gullet and a bigger-than-average gallbladder and liver. Additionally, when his jaws were opened, surgeons discovered a broad canal leading all the way into Terrer's stomach, big enough for them to actually see his insides. His stomach itself was enormous and covered in ulcers. In the modern day, some have since described Terrer as having polyphagia, meaning excessive hunger, and the ability to ingest a wide variety of items, including inedible ones. However, polyphagia isn't strictly speaking a medical condition in and of itself. It's a symptom that can be triggered by a myriad of other factors and is more likely an indicator of whatever Terrer's underlying condition was. But given the scarcity of medical records from the time, it's likely we'll never know what brought on such a ravenous polyphagia, whether it was the result of a stressful life and poor living conditions, or even an extreme case of an undocumented form of genetic disorder that has yet to be seen in a patient since. But as it just so happens, Terrer isn't the only disturbing page on Wikipedia that revolves around someone with pretty unusual eating habits. Fans of Hannibal will like this one. The rest of you, well, maybe don't watch right after eating or on an empty stomach. Back in 2023, the former home of a man named Armin Maives was burned down. According to his Wikipedia page, 2 juvenile suspects were under investigation for what was thought to be an act of arson, but no one was ever arrested, at least at the time this video was written. Now, nobody was hurt in the incident. In fact, Maives no longer lived in the house because he'd been incarcerated since 2004. So just who the heck is Armin Maives? Well, look no further than his Wikipedia page. Formerly a computer repair technician, Armin Maives would garner the international morbid curiosity of thousands when he murdered and ate another human being. Oh, but just you wait, the story gets even wilder and far more disturbed than that. Back in 2001, Maives made a post on an online forum advertising that he was looking for a well-built man between 18 and 25 years old. Well, that might sound like criteria for someone's online dating pool. Not many of those come with such an upfront stipulation. You see, Armin Maives wasn't interested in dating anyone. He was looking for someone who would willingly volunteer to be slaughtered and then consumed. And not in a fun way either. There were a number of responses, many of whom probably thought the solicitation was a dark joke and who responded expecting it to be such. However, any potential applicants backed out when they realized that wasn't a joke at all. Despite the disturbing proposition, Maives was shockingly brazen, upfront, and open about his intentions, never once even attempting to pressure anyone into doing anything they didn't want to. Then, in March 2001, a 43-year-old man from Berlin, Bernd Jürgen Armando Brandes, replied to the advertisement with genuine interest. The pair met pretty soon after, in Maives' home in the small town of Wüstefeld, Germany. Maives and Brandes filmed the entire encounter, including the agreement in which Brandes consented to be killed and eaten. The video has never been made public, and descriptions of its contents aren't something we can describe in too much detail here on YouTube without risking demonetization. But what we do know is after Brandes had taken 20 sleeping pills and chased it down with a whole bottle of cough syrup, he insisted that Maives bite off part of his body. When that didn't work, Maives switched the tact to using a knife, which did the trick. The pair of them both tried to eat the removed piece raw, but after finding it far too chewy, yes, Maives even described it as such, it was fried in a pan with salt, pepper, garlic, and wine, and cooked in some fat that Brandes himself provided. But then the flesh was too burned to be consumed, and it was instead fed to Maives' dog. After letting Brandes bleed in the bath until he lost consciousness, Maives then stabbed his volunteer and victim in the throat. Over the next 10 months, he would dismember and eat what was left of Brandes' corpse, storing the body in the freezer and eating up to 44 pounds worth of human flesh. If there's ever been a story that could put us off of leftovers, it's that one. Once Maifez was discovered to have body parts and the incriminating videotape in his home, he was arrested in 2002. His actions led to him being known by some as the Rothenburg Cannibal, or Der Metzgermeister, which roughly translates to the Master Butcher in English. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8.5 years in prison in 2004 until a retrial 2 years later upped his conviction to murder and is sentenced to life imprisonment. The house that was burned down in April 2023 was the same one where Maifez had eaten Brandes' body. Interestingly, before he was sentenced to prison, Maifez was deemed still fit to stand trial, despite a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder. This is a personality disorder that tends to present itself as a lack of interest in social relationships, emotional detachment, and a tendency to prefer a solitary, sheltered lifestyle. And if you were to, say, fall down a rabbit hole looking through Wikipedia articles about other psychiatric conditions, then you might stumble across our next entry in the most disturbing Wikipedia pages we could find, entitled Mass Psychogenic Illness. Now, you might have heard of this before by the name of mass hysteria, but mass psychogenic illness more widely refers to any instance where symptoms of an illness spread without a clear infectious agent being responsible. Symptoms can start from a disturbance in the nervous system and then spread rapidly to affect a cohesive group of people. This is all caused by external factors without any organic basis for them. For example, a population undergoing mass psychogenic illness might all quickly start developing headaches. That's one of the most common symptoms, despite all being healthy and having nothing about their bodies that should be currently causing them all to experience the headaches. Other symptoms of the mass psychogenic illness included dizziness, nausea, abdominal pain, coughing, fatigue, and many other symptoms. Outbreaks of mass hysteria can affect nearly everyone, although they are thought to be particularly prevalent in children and adolescents. But no one person is any more or less predisposed to mass psychogenic illness, and these symptoms can manifest in anyone under the right circumstances. Even more unsettling than the idea that this can happen almost any time to anybody is the fact that mass psychogenic illness is thought to have existed since as far back as the Middle Ages. Dancing manias, a widespread phenomenon that occurred all across mainland Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, were thought to have been the result of mass psychogenic illness. One case that took place in 1974 saw school children in Barry, Alabama afflicted with episodes of recurring itches after rumors among students sparked fears about a poison gas attack. Back in October 2001, directly after the 2001 anthrax attacks in the US, there were over 2,300 false alarms from people reportedly suffering from the physical symptoms of anthrax exposure, despite having never come into contact with the infection. There's naturally something disturbing about developing unusual symptoms, seemingly without any biological cause. And there can be something equally disturbing, if admittedly a little morbidly funny, about people who have died unusual deaths. Luckily, Wikipedia has a whole article dedicated to extremely rare and sometimes completely unique causes of death recorded throughout history. List of unusual deaths. Some of the earliest examples date as far back as the days of ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. Take Menes, an Egyptian pharaoh responsible for unifying Upper and Lower Egypt, who in 3200 BC was kidnapped and killed by a hippopotamus. Seems like Oscar Isaac was onto something with that song of his. Or how about the Athenian lawmaker who was killed in 620 BC as a result of being just too darn popular? Oh, tell me about it. Hard as it is to believe, Draco of Athens was supposedly smothered to death when he was buried in a shower of hats and cloaks thrown at him by the appreciative citizens of Aegina in Greece. But the more you look at the long, and we mean long, list of unusual deaths detailed in this Wikipedia article, the more you start to come across ones that aren't just absurd but far more unsettling than the others. Jumping way down the list to the 19th century, there's the likes of Matilda of Austria. Every teen has a rebellious phase, sure, but when your father is the Archduke Albrecht, Duke of Teschen, then you can't exactly be breaking social norms. Still, on the 6th of June, 1897, Matilda had been smoking when all of a sudden she heard her father returning home. Desperate to hide her bad habit from her aristocratic old man who had forbidden her to smoke, in her panic, Matilda accidentally set fire to her own dress. The resulting fire claimed her life. Smoking kills, folks. Arguably one of the more unsettling, frightening deaths from this era came in August 1888, when an unknown man in Iraq suffered an almost statistically impossible end. Around 8:30, over a village in Sulaymaniyah, Iraq, which was part of the Ottoman Empire at the time, a shower of meteorites came raining down from above. Although far from being an apocalyptic Armageddon-style shower of burning rocks and devastation, one unidentified man was struck and killed by a falling meteor, with another being hit and permanently paralyzed. It's a disturbing reminder that while your chances of being killed by a meteor are low, it turns out they're never quite zero. Once again, scrolling our way even further through the history of strange deaths, we come to the 18th of August, 1960. Clarence Hudson, a 66-year-old janitor at a department store, was found dead in his apartment by police. Even stranger than the question of who would kill a janitor in his 60s was the elaborate method used to kill him: a homemade electric chair. Whoever had taken Clarence Hudson's life had tied him to a chair with several wet towels over his head and feet. The police estimated that as many as 1,000 volts were shot through the man's body. On the 29th of June 1971, the Soyuz 11 spacecraft depressurized during preparations for re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Soviet cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev became the first and only so far human deaths that didn't take place on Earth, dying instead outside of our own atmosphere. Sure, being a cosmonaut in the early days of space exploration was a job that came with more than its fair share of risks. But you wouldn't expect one of the most disturbing of the deaths detailed in this article to belong to a pizza delivery man. In 2003, Brian Wells, a delivery man from Kent, Washington, attempted to rob a bank by having a bomb collar locked around his neck. The contraption consisted of 2 pipe bombs and a hinged collar, almost like a large handcuff, as well as a couple of kitchen timers and even decoy wires to avoid it being disconnected. Co-conspirators allegedly told Wells that the bomb was a fake, but he was killed when the collar detonated. In June 2022, a woman named Maya Murmu was trampled to death in Oshita, India, by an elephant. Maybe an uncommon cause of death, sure, but hardly unwarranted. Elephants are huge wild animals and easily startled, of course. But what was so strange about this incident was what happened at Maya's funeral. The same elephant reportedly came back to find her lifeless body, attacking the corpse and hurling it into the air. Even as recently as 2023, Adam Johnson, a 29-year-old member of an English professional ice hockey team, the Nottingham Panthers, died during a game against the rival Sheffield Steelers. Falling over on the ice, Adam was killed when an ice skate cut open his neck. Oh, and as if this list of human deaths wasn't disturbing enough for you, the list of unusual deaths on Wikipedia has an entirely separate table dedicated to strange animal deaths too, just in case you felt like really ruining your day. But if you want to do that, then we might just have the disturbing Wikipedia page for you. One that is liable to keep you awake at night, staring at your ceiling in abject horror. The timeline of the far future. The article itself states it would be impossible to accurately predict the future with any degree of certainty. However, using our present understanding of various scientific fields, we are able to make some predictions about what the future might look like, even if those mainly amount to a broad outline. And here's a mild spoiler: things don't look good. What is so unsettling and disturbing about reading through the timeline of the far future is how horrifying it is. Few other articles on Wikipedia really hammer home just how tiny humanity is compared to the wide expanse of the universe, even the lifetime of the Earth itself. Most projections indicate that humanity will be long gone, as in extinct, before the sun expands, or radioactive decay eventually disintegrates all matter in the universe. Take this, for example. 10,000 years from now is considered the most probable lifespan for human technological civilization. That might sound like a lot, but get this, according to the predictions on this timeline, it'll take 1.2 billion years for all plant life to die out. Once that happens, any remaining animal life on Earth will be cooked by rising temperatures. Do you want to feel even more of that cosmic existential dread? Try to imagine how unfathomable a billion of anything is. Well, guess what? The predictions in this timeline go so far that the time frame stops being measured in recognizable numbers. Billions and trillions become quadrillions, quintillions, even unvigintillions, and novemvigintillions. That's a 1 followed by 90 zeros, and so on. The most disturbing part about this timeline of the far future isn't just its predictions, it's the way it reminds you just how tiny we really are. Thanks, Wikipedia. Now check out terrifying Wikipedia pages that you should never click on, or watch this instead.